All right. We are on the YouTube. I just got a notification from my YouTube that we are live. Live on youtube.com.
Shit.
Oh, yes, we are. Cool.
We sure are, motherfuckers.
I'm sure you could have people ask us questions.
Well, and that's why I'm changing. I want to change the format a little bit because I think what's been happening more than anything is, and I was doing some research. The reason like Philip DeFranco's shows are only like 14 minutes long, people have a really short attention span
Yep.
on YouTube. And they might be willing to pop a podcast on and listen to it for an hour, but on YouTube, good luck if your shit's that long. So I thought it would be fun to try out a different format. I think it would also be cool to have you guys give more input than you always have been, like as opposed to just commentary, like actually being the expert, if you will, in particular types of topics. And it also gives it sort of demands a little bit more investment from each of us, that we come up with topics that we want to talk about, and then the other two are sort of blindsided by those topics and can share our thoughts and opinions on a topic that we haven't spent days or hours or weeks thinking about. I kind of like that idea. It'd be a little bit more spontaneous as well. So we'll see how it goes.
I want a raise.
Okay.
I want 100% raise.
You got it, brother. 200%.
Okay. I'm on it. All right.
Excellent. All right. So here comes the bumper music.
All right.
Here we go. Welcome to the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. I am your host. We are coming to you live on youtube.com and streaming all around the world via podcast at some point in the very near future on iTunes and Stitcher and, oh, I'm sorry, they're called Apple Podcasts. No longer iTunes. Got to get that one right. We don't want to get a visit from the Apple Gestapo to tell us that we have branded it incorrectly. But this is the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. We are live, and I am here, as always, with my two very good friends, Chaz and Robinson. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen.
Wonderful. It's lovely to see you.
Lovely to be seen.
Good.
Yes, Robinson, you just got done working, huh?
Yep.
How was work?
Fucking exhausted, man.
Woo! You know it.
My back is sore.
Well, I've been working a lot too lately, and I pulled the carpet out in my bedroom because we're going to replace the flooring in the bedroom now. It was time. I told Rachel that we needed to wait and let the kids and the dogs just destroy all the carpeting in the house because they were little. And now that the kids are a little bit older and they don't spend as much time in my bedroom, we're going to pull out the disgusting carpet. So I did that. And I came to terms with my age the next day because I was squatting and standing and squatting and leaning and standing and sitting and squatting and leaning for a couple of hours to pull all the carpet out. And the very next day, I could barely get out of a chair.
That is not an easy job.
I was so goddamn sore.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I also made the mistake a couple days earlier. Peyton, my older son, well, both of my kids right now play baseball, but my older son, Peyton, is struggling with running the bases effectively. He runs, he's got a weird stride. And so I wanted to kind of instruct him, teach him how to run better, more efficiently, more effectively. And so we were in the front yard, and I put on my cross trainers and tried to show him how to run properly. And so we're kind of sprinting back and forth for no more than 15 minutes. And my lower body felt like I had been hit by a very short freight train the day after. So stretching is key. Anyway, so this is the Sober Happy Hour radio broadcast. If you read the description, you will know that we are going to test out a new format to this humble broadcast. We are going to keep it shorter, and we are going to, instead of focusing on one topic, we are going to each discuss a topic. And we really want your feedback. We want to know, do you like this new format? Do you think it works? Are the shorter episodes better? Are they worse? Do you like the old format? You can leave out of the comments that you want the podcast to come back, because we do too. And it will, I promise. I think I'm just going to have to cough up some money to host the podcasts. And that's okay, because you can donate if you have the Cash app on your Android or iOS device. If you have the Cash app, you can donate $1, $10, $100, $1 million to the cash tag SHHRP. And that will help us pay for some hosting. But
Hear that?
what?
No, never mind. Sorry.
So we wanted to take the time to bring up a topic, explain the topic, and then we'll talk about the topic. That's the plan. It's simple. It's really not that complicated. We're not talking graphics and lower thirds and cutting to video or anything like that. It's just more topics for a shorter amount of time. So let us know what you think. Let us know in the comments. Let us know via email, soberhappyhour@gmail.com. Let us know on the Facebook, facebook.com/soberhappyhour. If you love it, if you hate it, if you have suggestions, we are open to your feedback. So I will start. How about that? Great. I'm glad I don't have any detractors. Here we go. So this one was very interesting, and it's not necessarily like my genre as much as other topics that I found, but this one was really interesting because I've been having a hard time for a long time deciding whether or not I believed in gaming addiction as a real addiction, because we've classified addiction on this show many times, right? It has to negatively impact your life and or those around you. And it has to be a compulsive behavior that you cannot stop, even in the face of bad things starting to happen. And with that being said, this story that I read, multiple stories, but it's kind of one story about multiple instances. Not only was it heartbreaking, but it also helps me understand and solidify the concept of gaming addiction. So, Kim J. Bohm, a father and a husband, was questioned by the police about the death of his young daughter. And Kim told the police that the baby was, quote, a premature baby from the beginning, but the cause of death determined by the medical examiner was a little less vague. And this comes from the Daily Beast. The baby, according to the medical examiner, the baby had died of malnutrition as a result of her parents' online gaming addiction. Now, it doesn't mention the game that the parents played, but I assume it was one of those online, mega multiplayer games where people just get obsessed with it, World of Warcraft, or maybe like a Counter-Strike, Half-Life kind of shit.
Or was it like those online gambling things?
So that could very well be the case. And in one of these stories, that is absolutely the case. Robinson.
How old was the daughter?
Great question. So the tale of Kim and his wife, they're a South Korean couple who their all-consuming video game habit led to the neglect of their 3-month-old baby. When real life shockingly interrupted the gaming fantasy that they'd been sucked into, the couple was actually caring for a virtual child in 6 to 12-hour binges. She was cooing. She had a little avatar. Her name was Anima, and players earned points after reaching certain levels in the game. So this happened in South Korea. So South Korea's gaming obsession threw shockwaves across the world when in September, the first story is from 2009, the couple was arrested for the death of their baby girl. Starved to death, the baby girl died while the Kims went on all-night gaming binges. It was the first known fatality from gaming addiction. The subsequent trial raised a previously unheard of legal precedent. Could online gaming be grouped with gambling, drugs, and drinking as an addiction that impairs a person's judgment enough to make such a fatal mistake? Now, this one happened 5 years ago, and the issue has not remained an anomaly because just this past April, so last month, a 22-year-old father was arrested for leaving his 2-year-old son to starve at home while he played games for 10 straight days. So there's an HBO documentary. It airs in July. It's called Love Child. It's a documentary, HBO, July 28th. But the director and writer, creator, seeks an explanation for such horrific negligence in a country where an estimated 2 million South Koreans are addicted to gaming. So that's just insane to me. The little girl who was already underweight went from 6.4 pounds to 5.5 pounds, was laying in a crib with a blanket pulled over her in a disgusting room. She was being fed spoiled milk, and the couple was completely ignorant as to how to raise a child. And after the infant's death, the parents were afraid to alert the police, so they did online searches for funeral arrangements before calling the authorities. A typical parent would weep in this type of situation, but I quote, they showed no emotion, the investigator said. None of the investigators could believe what they were seeing at first. So part of the problem in South Korea is that they have professional gamers. They make money. They make a living off of gaming. They compete in championships or selling of virtual money for real cash. And the gold farming that this couple was doing was the main source of their income. So they would go on PC Bang, or they'd go to PC Bang. It's a gaming cafe for large blocks of time because it was cheaper than paying for their own internet service or whatever. And they could play for 10 hours. And their whole belief was that they were trying to make money and save money for their family. So they confessed to the charges. And the father said in the trial, quote, "I will be guilty until the day I die." Thoughts?
So is it mainly in South Korea that all of this is a problem, or are there
Yeah,
Japan and China?
So the multiple stories that I found were specific to South Korea because there is a pretty severe online gaming problem there. Problem meaning that people will neglect other aspects of their life, hygiene, paying bills, family. They'll completely disassociate from their lives so that they can desperately try and make very small amounts of money, because there are some, right? Just like any sort of, profession. What came to my mind was professional musicians, right? Rock stars. There are millions of aspiring rock stars, but very, very, very few actually make it and make a living playing, recording, performing, producing music. With the online gaming, though, if you're a rock star wannabe, you might spend, a few hours a day trying to play some music, but it doesn't just suck you in this way. It doesn't become an obsession for most people. This online gaming does, because the more they play, the more money they have that they could make. So playing 10, 20, 60 hours at a time without a break, you stand the chance of making real money. And so they do it. But it is, to me, no different than gambling. And clearly, it is to the point in South Korea where there are people making these tragic mistakes, these horrible decisions to game as much as they possibly can. And now there are cases of child neglect and child death because of such severe neglect. So my stance after doing some research here is now solidified. I now personally believe that gaming can and is an addiction for some people. But just like anything else, it is a minority of people. But for the people that it affects, it can affect them massively in their
dude,
lives.
Google image PC bang. These are some like high-end classy joints though.
Like casinos?
No, I mean like seriously. It looks like something out of like not like Vegas, but like it,
I believe it.
wow.
Big money, I'm sure. So
Like,
that's
it looks like a nightclub. It looks like a fucking like nightclubs with a huge row after row of people on computers.
so before we move on to the next topic, I will ask the two of you. If something gets to the point for some people where they are willing, whether it's on purpose, by accident, or even unbeknownst to them, but something has gotten to a point for some people where it is, they're so roped in, they are so obsessed, they spend so much time and effort and energy on this one thing that children can be neglected to the point of death, not dissimilar from a fictional account of dead babies from the movie Trainspotting. You remember, Robinson? The baby crawling on the ceiling in Trainspotting because the heroin addicts forgot that the baby needed to be fed. And so the baby died, and they find the baby green and rotting in the crib because they had been on some multi-day bender without taking care of the baby. This is no different than that. So, is gaming addiction real? Yes or no? Chaz.
Yes.
Robinson.
Absolutely.
Fucking A. If you or anyone you know is suffering from a gaming addiction or it's getting to that point, there is help. But because it's not drugs, because it's not alcohol, because it's not gambling, it's going to be really difficult for people to identify it, and even more difficult for someone wrapped up in it to admit that they have a problem. So, Chaz,
Yo.
you had one for us.
Yeah. So, in case anyone didn't notice, I believe it was in 2015, 52,000 people died from opioid-related overdoses. So
52,000?
this is kind of a 52,000 in 2015.
Fuck.
Yeah. So this is kind of a problem, as you can see.
Yeah.
And it couldn't come at a worse time either, especially because we now have what is called the American Health Care Act.
Aha.
So oddly enough, Donald Trump appointed his son-in-law.
Show some respect. President.
Number
Trump.
45. Number 45 appointed his son-in-law to solve the opioid crisis. Well, Jared Kushner has been often seen as very, very bright and very, innovative, etc. He's got a lot of promise and stuff.
Very fit.
And very fit, yes, indeed. And one way I imagine that young Jared Kushner could tell number 45 would be a great way to resolve the opioid problem is to not endorse the American Health Care Act because it takes money away from substance abuse.
Substance abuse recovery programs.
Or just benefits at all for private or Medicaid.
Right. So,
I mean,
and just
that would be
clear,
one way of not, that would be one way of helping to solve it, is just not doing that.
So what you're saying is Jared Kushner was appointed by the president.
Correct.
President Orangutan.
Mm-hmm.
That he was now in charge of solving the opioid addiction epidemic in the U.S.
That's what's been said, yeah.
While at the same time, the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress have passed a bill to overturn the Affordable Health Care Act, the Affordable Care Act, with a new bill that essentially does away with coverage, mandatory coverage for mental health and substance abuse.
One of the 10 essential benefits are mental health and substance abuse benefits.
And
this would get rid of those, or at least allow states to apply for waivers exempting them from having to take them. So
in an attempt to better the opioid addiction epidemic, and it's fair to call it an epidemic, 52,000 deaths.
That's an epidemic.
The same administration, on one hand, is saying we need to solve this problem, but on the other hand is trying to pass legislation that does away with programs and treatment options for people that are suffering from this addiction.
Correct.
Holy fuck.
Yeah. So again, like I said, this could not come at a worse time, especially because the estimates are that next year, 14 million people, yeah, there it is, 14 million people in 2018 will lose healthcare insurance coverage.
And I've heard numbers as high as 24 million.
That's in 2016.
Oh, wow. So an additional 18?
No, that's a good question. I don't know if it's an additional more or it's just more.
Got it. those numbers from like the CBO are kind of confusing sometimes.
Yeah, but the CBO says all sorts of other things that a lot of people didn't look at. Like,
Well, they didn't even wait
they
for the numbers to come out before they voted on it.
Well, here's an interesting one. The CBO estimates that outlays for Social Security benefits would decrease by about $3 billion over the 2017 to 2026 period because Social Security expenditures would decrease due to earlier mortality. The CBO said that. The CBO said that.
So people don't live as long, thereby reducing the cost
Of Social Security.
of Social Security.
Yep.
Robinson.
Old people, are you paying attention? Okay.
You said
Are you paying
2026.
attention?
2026.
Yeah.
By 2026, Robinson,
I will be here.
you may well be eligible for Medicare. And I don't mean that as a knock to your age. I mean that sincerely. And this motherfucker is essentially trying to reduce the coverage that you could receive, that you have fucking paid into.
No. It's not that it would be reduced for the people receiving it. It's just that the paying out would be reduced because there would be no one to pay to because they were dying.
No, right. No, I get that. That's a kind of separate thing. It would be that, now if you want to go to rehab and you're poor,
yes. Mm-hmm.
you would have to come out of pocket for it, which means you're not going to go, which means you're going to die.
It also says that the Medicaid expenditures would also increase due to reduced access to birth control.
Ooh, lovely.
So there's all sorts of things that the CBO estimates say that didn't get over, didn't really go through. I'm really worried or concerned about the Social Security expenditures would decrease due to earlier mortality.
Yes. Let's for the first time in modern history, let's decrease the life expectancy of Americans.
And really, like, if you really were concerned about overpopulation or there being too much or too many of a certain number of a certain group of people that you just did not want on this earth, that you just, were not too thrilled about their existence.
Like Jews.
Or any old group of people. Well, you have the Nazis who made this entire giant industry owe death with, trains, planes, automobiles, and everything else that they did, just totally geared toward killing people.
Oh,
then
you mean what Secretary Sean Spicer referred to as Holocaust centers?
Yes, Holocaust centers. They made up Holocaust centers, but also then you had these grassroots movement, just plain old folks down in Rwanda, using, coming up with, really innovative tools like, gardening equipment, drills and machetes and everything else to also just kind of, get rid of those folks that they just really didn't like all that much. But those those are very, very inefficient and costly and messy ways of getting rid of people. See, the best way to get rid of people is just to roll back healthcare coverage. Sure. I mean, that's the whole reason that population increases so much is because we have better healthcare. People are all you need to do is not have people being born more. We just need to have more people dying. And the best way to do that is to remove modern medicine.
We have a brilliant man in our government right now who, and I quote, said, "No one has ever died from lack of access to healthcare."
Wow.
Who said that?
Yes.
Monkey brains.
Monkey Brains. Yes, Senator Monkey Brains. Let me find out for you. I will tell you right now.
See
Hey,
you next
Robinson.
Tuesday. That's all I have to say to him. See you next Tuesday. I was telling Mike that that is my word. That the only word I can use for these people is a word I reserve for people I have the utmost, disdain for, and that is the only word I can use to describe the people pushing this bill through. And by extension, also to anyone who supports the people who are, pushing this bill through as well. It applies to them as well.
So it was a gubernatorial candidate in the great state of Idaho, Republican and current congressional representative Raul Labrador
Labrador.
said,
Raul Labrador.
nobody dies because they don't have access to health care.
Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I just got out. That is just the most utterly fucked up thing I've ever heard.
We talk
Holy
about
shit.
ignorance. That is ignorance at its best.
I would have loved to have been there and see like the look on the reporter's face, just like,
Oh my God. Robinson,
Yes.
did you, sir, have an opportunity to at least browse the article that I sent you?
I skimmed it very quickly.
Awesome.
It brought up a whole world of interesting thoughts and ideas.
So it was related to what?
Sex addiction
Yes, sir.
would be well, sex addiction. When somebody goes to a sex addicts anonymous meeting, are they going to try to hook up?
Hell yeah.
people go to AA meetings to hook up.
People go to AA meetings to find other people to drink and drug with.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know. I remember hearing people saying that like they would go to cocaine anonymous sex addicts would go to cocaine addicts anonymous meeting because girls who are not girls who are trying to not do coke anymore will do the next best thing for that same kind of high, which is fuck,
Mm,
instead of doing coke. And it's like
really?
easy pickings.
Yeah. Well, and the only thing better than sex when you are a cocaine addict is sex on cocaine.
Absolutely.
And there's probably plenty of that. And I don't want to knock your 12-step programs too hard, but I personally know of people that would go to these 12-step meetings who are fucking predators. They're looking for impressionable, what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerable individuals who are in a tough spot, who might be even in a spot where they literally do anything for drugs. And so you'd have fucked up people that would go and say that they want to get clean and get somebody, to trust them, and then offer them drugs and say, hey, we can always try again tomorrow. So here's some cocaine. Let's fuck. It's pretty fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Did you learn anything else about sex addiction, Mr. Robinson?
No, I didn't
Good.
really get to read much of it.
No, that's okay. I know you were working, but so we've talked about sex addiction in the past, and again, trying to define it.
Exactly. Trying to find it. Well, when I was with Beth, when I met you, and then when we moved up here together, she told me that I was a sex addict and I needed to get help.
Okay.
I'd never had because, and this is based on her observation of me just looking looking. I sit down in a cafe with her, and I look at everybody that walks by.
You are kind of a perv.
Oh, no doubt. I'm not a perv. If perving was a sport, I'd be a fucking champ. Okay,
Yeah, man. Olympian.
gold medalist.
Yeah. The Michael Phelps of perving.
Yeah.
And the only person to turn the male gaze into an actual superpower.
Yeah.
And I hone my skills every day.
Yes.
Nice.
But Robinson also doesn't discriminate. He finds beauty in everyone, as long as they have tits.
I don't even like tits.
I'm just kidding. So, sex addiction, also known as hypersexual disorder, is characterized by persistent and escalating sexual thoughts and acts that have a negative impact on the individual's life. Sex addicts struggle to control or postpone sexual feelings and actions. Most sex addicts do not know how to achieve genuine intimacy, forming little or no attachment to their sexual partners. So I think that hits on the point, right? The point being that to be an addiction, there has to have a negative impact on someone's life. And the inability to control yourself,
Okay.
I think, also helps define sex addiction in someone's behavior.
I went to a meeting once.
Mhm.
Because, when somebody tells me something like that, okay, well, maybe you're right. Let's find out. I don't say,
Sure.
oh no, fuck you, you're wrong. I say, okay, let's see if this is true. Because if I am flawed, if somebody tells me I'm flawed in some way, I want to, find out what this flaw is and see if I can, improve my character in any way possible. So I went to a sex addicts anonymous, sex anonymous meeting, whatever they call it. And there were no women. They separate the men from the women.
Smart.
And the things that I heard made me realize that I am far, far from being a sex addict.
Yeah.
I enjoy sex, and I'm definitely a pervert.
Hmm.
And I like a lot of kinky sex, but I only want to have sex with someone who really wants to have sex with me too. So it's not like I'm just trying to go have random sex with other people. But these people were talking about the places that they would go and the times that they would go, like basically 2 or 3 times a day. Some of them would go to um, their public. What do they call it? I can't remember what they call it. It's just like there's a name for it, but it's like a place where all sex addicts kind of like say, "Hey, this toilet in this park, just
Right.
go in," and they would just like, men and women would just meet in the park, and they're like, I don't know how they know which of them is a sex addict, but they would just know, and they would like go to the court, go to the toilet, and have a quick fuck.
It's the foot tapping under the stall thing, the code.
Yeah.
That one Republican senator was caught doing that shit
Or sometimes there were
in the
just
airport.
a guy would like one guy would post on Craigslist that he would be in this toilet in stall number 3 with the door unlocked. Just come in and I'll suck your cock.
And I could see that being very destructive.
Be there like 6 hours all day, just doing nothing but sucking cocks from whoever happens to come in
for free.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you
so
addiction, and none of that shit has like I've never had any kind of problem like that.
Right. So types of sex addiction. There's a wide range of behaviors that can be symptoms of sex addiction. Compulsive masturbation, multiple affairs, anonymous sex, like what you just mentioned, obsessive dating, compulsive use of pornography, risky or unsafe sex, cyber sex, exhibitionism, voyeurism, prostitution, or use of prostitutes. Some of the warning signs: secretive or dangerous sexual behaviors, lying about or hiding sexual activities, having sex regardless of the consequences, like the threat of being caught or facing financial problems or the risk of contracting STDs, engaging in the practice of voyeurism or exhibitionism in a way that bring discomfort, pain, or legal problems, legal or career problems due to sexual behaviors.
Some of those
Inappropriate, huh?
Some of those just sound like fetishes.
Sure, but I think if it's a fetish and it's consensual and it's with someone else and it's not destroying your life, then fucking A. But if it's like behind your wife's back and you try to be this wonderful husband and father while you're doing these awful things and potentially contracting STDs to give them to your unknowing wife, that's a problem.
And telling yourself that you're just a sexual astronaut.
Yeah, I'm a sexual astronaut.
I was on it.
Inappropriate sexual behaviors. So having sex at inappropriate times in inappropriate places and or with inappropriate partners. Unknowingly flirting with or sexualizing someone. Compromising one's reputation due to sexual behavior. Having a serious relationship threatened or destroyed because of outside sexual activity. Feeling uncomfortable about masturbation because of the frequency, the fantasies that one engages in, props used, or places that someone masturbates, or feeling entitled to sex. Also, some of the problems are using sex to cope with problems or needing more sex to feel, quote, normal. So having sex with someone you didn't find sexually desirable or that you didn't want to have sex with for other reasons, aside from just wanting to have sex. Believing that sex will make life bearable. Sounds like drug use. Having sex to try to deal with or escape from one's life's problems. Also like drug use. Needing greater variety and energy in sexual activities just to achieve an acceptable, quote, acceptable level of physical and emotional relief. So, yes, sex addiction is real. That's my opinion. Chaz?
Yep.
Robinson?
Absolutely.
But I think people like to label other people. You have a friend who might binge drink every once in a while and get super drunk and belligerent. You want to label that person an alcoholic, right? You have somebody that has a lot of potentially promiscuous sex. That doesn't make them a sex addict. When it comes to drug addiction, it's very easy, I think, to label someone a drug addict, because if they're physically dependent on a drug and they can't stop taking it or else they go into severe withdrawals, they are an addict. But with sex, with gambling, with gaming, it's harder. It's much, much harder. Because technically speaking, physically speaking, mentally, maybe not so much, but physically, somebody could stop the behavior without having to suffer those kinds of physical consequences. So it's much easier for somebody to potentially hide one of these types of addictions as well. So this is our new format, at least for the time being, until our listeners tell us that they don't like it. But I had a lot of fun tonight. I enjoyed hearing from you guys. I enjoyed the commentary. I think it's cool to have a few different topics, and the fact that we're trying to stick to sort of areas that we are a little bit more passionate about. I will also be sharing potential like addiction and overdose and death related news. I know that that's not something we like to spend a whole show on. Robinson, you've mentioned that we don't particularly, our listeners don't particularly want to hear an entire episode about a dead celebrity or something, but it could certainly be something that we can bring up in a show and talk about somebody that may be a public figure that died due to or got arrested for DUI and is now in rehab or something like that. People that are trying to get help, or people that couldn't get help and died.
Right.
People that you may know, right? People that may be familiar to you. That will be kind of my topic, as well as treatment legislation and things like that, because I tend to stay pretty plugged in to those types of things. Chaz will be talking more from a clinical sense around recovery options and healthcare, mental health, and things like that. And Robinson will be discussing things related to potentially sex addiction is something that you've always known more about than me or Chaz. Not because you are a sex addict, but because you've known some sex addicts, and because of some of the, let's say, extracurricular activities that you have always been involved in. Also, drug use. So potentially new fads in drug use, new types of drugs that people are using.
Or ways of using
Drugs. I think that would be right up your alley to share that with people. And it'll allow us to talk about 3 different things on every show, comment on each other's topics, and then share that commentary with the world. It'll also help us keep the shows a little bit shorter. It will prevent tangential, 15-minute long diatribes about something that's not even related to what the show's supposed to be about, and keep us honest. So if any of our listeners, go ahead.
And we can go to sleep earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if any of our listeners or our subscribers have any great ideas about topics for the show, we'd love to hear about them. Shoot us an email, soberhappyhour@gmail.com. You can also write us on our Facebook, facebook.com/soberhappyhour, or you could leave a comment right here on this YouTube video, and we would be happy to respond. We will read, and if we love what you've shared, then we'll talk about it on the show. And also, we are open to your feedback, as always. If you have suggestions about this new format, if you don't like this new format, I say if you don't like this new format, well, fuck you.
Go fuck
Get over it.
Exactly. No, I think it's a good idea. I think we've come to that point.
Time to evolve a little bit.
Yes, exactly.
Excellent. So we will stick to trying to get to a show every other week. I know we missed last week, but that was all my fault. And we will try to stick to that format and stick to that frequency and that cadence. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's our show. We're going to end it there. If you like this show, if you enjoy what we have to say, please hit the subscribe button. If you want to be notified every time there is a new show, hit the little bell that's right next to that subscribe button. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter @SoberHappyHour. And if you or yours is considering getting sober, I highly recommend it. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, mothers. Happiest of Mother's Day.